Joining us now is South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy. He chaired the special committee on Benghazi, so he's no stranger to the challenges of running into partisan politics when trying to do an investigation. He joins us from Greenville. Congressman, I want to start with this question of unmasking that Chairman Nunes has brought up. Has he shown you any of what caused him to suggest that Obama officials doing surveillance captured some Trump campaign associates and then unmasked them in the process of investigating?
He has not shown it to me, John. I'm vaguely familiar with it, no more, no less familiar with it than Adam Schiff is. I'll just tell you this. My understanding is Chairman Nunes briefed the commander-in-chief on matters unrelated to the Russia investigation. So if that's a big deal in Washington, then we've sunk to a new low.
Well, I guess Congressman Schiff would say, but the president is the one that's a part of this investigation being done by the committee, so that the chairman shouldn't be talking to him.
Well, then let me repeat what I said. The chairman of House Intel briefed the commander-in-chief on something that has nothing to do with the Russia investigation. So if the commander-in-chief cannot be briefed by the chairperson of the House Intel Committee on a matter that has nothing to do with the FBI investigation, then I don't know what they can talk about, John.
Right. So he's
the commander-in-chief.
So if this the one they're investigating at the moment in the committee and that you're investigating, should it then be taken out of this investigation, have a separate investigation on both the issues that Chairman Nunes has discovered this week and then also one that you're quite concerned about, which is the leaks that have been in the paper, some of them potentially illegal? Get that out of this question of Russia to keep things from getting mixed the way they appear to have.
Well, they are separate, and I heard my friend from California mention an independent commission. Thank goodness we have one. It's called the FBI. The FBI has counterintelligence jurisdiction, and they have criminal jurisdiction. And what we learned on Monday, and it's about the only thing that we learned on Monday, was that the FBI is investigating both. They are the world's premier law enforcement agency. They are independent. You have women and men at the Department of Justice who have dedicated their careers to the blind pursuit of justice. It doesn't get any more independent than that. So we have an independent entity investigating counterintelligence and allegations of potential criminality. Let Congress do its job, which is provide oversight over the intelligence community.
Do you have any sense from the chairman about the schedule of when this new information that we've been talking about here, this question of unmasking, when you might have enough information to make a judgment about whether this is in fact something that was done improperly or whether, as Congressman Schiff said, this is just the normal procedures for going through unmasking?
It's just one more reason to bring Director Comey and Admiral Rogers back on Tuesday. It's incredibly important. Adam is right. Adam is right that the incidental collection of U.S. persons happens. What I wish some of my friends on the other side would be a little more outraged about is the political use of that unmasking. So I understand we collect U.S. citizens, but we don't read about those U.S. citizens on the front page of the New York Times and the Washington Post. That, in addition to surveillance programs, is also a felony. So I hope that we learn more about that on Tuesday. All of this is important, John, every bit of it. Russia's not our friend. They attacked our democracy. I want to investigate every fact that is related thereto. But the felonious dissemination of classified information is the only thing we know for sure is a crime, and it would be nice if we showed the same level of interest in that.
Let me ask you, you chaired a committee that got a lot of attention in the papers. What's your sense of the health of this committee? We've seen dueling press conferences. There's been a lot of accusations and passive aggression here. How healthy is this committee?
I think it's fine. I actually think Chairman Nunes and Ranking Member Schiff are both good men, and I think they get along fine. I think what you learned Monday, because I heard the witnesses almost 100 times, John, say they could not answer the question in that setting. And I want you and your viewers to ask themselves, why are we satisfied with every other facet of culture having serious investigations done confidentially? The grand jury, judges meeting with attorneys, police officers interviewing suspects. All of that is done confidentially, and we are more than satisfied with those investigations. And yet, when it comes to Congress, we think we ought to have a public hearing. 100 times, those two witnesses said they could not answer the question in that setting. Why in the hell would we go back to that setting if the witnesses can't answer the questions?
All right, Congressman Gowdy, we're going to give you the last word there. Thanks so much for being with us. And we'll be back in a moment with some thoughts on the president and the presidency. Stay with us.
This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Sandra Smith, Meghan McCain, host of Kennedy on Fox Business, Kennedy herself, and today's #OneLuckyGuy. We welcome back TV's Judge Alex Ferrer, when you know him really well. He is outnumbered. Good to have you.
That's great to be here. Thank you.
What are you when you first meet him?
Just, you know, Judge Alex
my
on
liege.
TV. But it's like Miss Jackson if you're... Never mind.
Just to clear that up.
Glad you're
It's
here.
great to be
Good to
here.
have you, Judge.
Next time, bring the sunshine from
I can't
Florida.
get blamed every time you guys have lousy weather. I only get credit for the good stuff.
All right. Well, shall we get to the news? That's
Absolutely.
some good stuff. All right, here we go. We begin with President Trump spreading the blame for the collapse of the GOP's replacement of Obamacare. After initially taking Democrats to task, the president is criticizing conservative lawmakers and think tanks. His tweet on the matter is such: Democrats are smiling that the Freedom Caucus, with the help of the Club for Growth and Heritage, have saved Planned Parenthood and O'Care! Exclamation point. Amid shockwaves reverberating throughout Washington, one high-profile member of the Freedom Caucus, Texas Congressman Ted Poe, resigned from the group this weekend. He says the time has come for the caucus to stop saying no all the time and show leadership instead. Here he is.
Sometimes you're going to have to say yes. And so I was not going to vote no because Obamacare is now the law of the land. And it's a disaster. And so I think it was unfortunate that even though changes and that we were included, the Freedom Caucus decided that no was going to be the answer. And I think at some time we're going to have to say, yes, we are in power. We need to lead.
But a key member of the House Freedom Caucus, Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio, says his group did the nation a favor.
I think we saved the American people from a bad bill. If anyone should be cheering, it should be the American people. Never forget, Bill, only 17% of the country approved of this legislation. So let's get back to work. Let's not blame people. Let's get back to work and do what the American people sent us here to do, which is repeal this law.
Judge, your take.
I think they better do something about this law. The idea of passing on it and going on to other projects is not going to sit very well, because a lot of the money that they were expecting on for tax reform was based on the fact that they were going to pass this legislation. So they're going to end up with a weak tax reform if they do that. And come 2 years from now, they're going to lose the Senate. Because, look, the American people got fed up when they first said, we don't have the Senate. And, you know, everything we do in the House gets killed by Reid in the Senate. So voters went out en masse and they gave them the Senate. Then they said, we don't have the presidency. Everything we do in the House and Senate gets vetoed by the president. So now they have the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And if they don't make hay out of that, they're done.
So maybe it's time for some self-critiquing, as Mark Meadows, the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, put it on one of the Sunday shows over the weekend. He insisted that this is not over, and he said he regretted not spending more time with moderate Republicans and Democrats to find some consensus.
Yeah, you know...
But it was moderate Republicans and the conservatives that had the biggest issue with the legislation. I mean, the Freedom Caucus actually found consensus with the Tuesday group, which is the group of moderate Republicans who also had pledged to not vote for the bill. Maybe in the end, it was a really bad piece of legislation. Maybe they should go back to the primary source instead of, you know, this continued infighting within the party. Maybe they should look at the bill and the fact that they did have 7 years to craft something that wasn't just a series of amendments and rewrites to Obamacare.
Yeah, you know, Judge, real quickly to go back to what you said, though, just on those 3 pillars that the president wanted to get done, Obamacare, the budget, tax reform, the last 2 really did kind of depend on the money coming from the first, because it's dependent, Obamacare, on the IRS, which is another government agency. Mick Mulvaney, who's the director of Office of Management and Budget, had this to say, though, about what's really going on inside the Republican Party. Let's watch.
You can blame it on the Freedom Caucus if you want to, but there's also a lot of moderates, Charlie Dent will be on your show in a little bit, who are also against the bill. So it's sort of the powers that be in Washington that won. I think if there's anything that's disappointing and sort of an educational process to the Trump administration, was that this place was a lot more rotten than we thought that it was.
Megan?
Okay.
Listen, I've been salty and embarrassed all weekend. I really have been. Went to a party on Friday. It's the only thing in Washington, D.C. This is the only thing everyone can talk about. There's plenty of blame to go around everywhere. I'm mad at Paul Ryan. You're right. It was a bad bill from its inception. I'm mad we didn't take longer to get this done. Why did this have to be done in simply a week? This is a signature bill, a signature promise from the campaign, and by the way, for the past 8 years that we were given the House, the Senate, and the presidency for, that we have completely blown and said, by the way, I'm sorry, everyone, Arizonans at 125% premiums, you're just screwed, and you're going to have to deal with it because Washington can't get its act together. Do you know how deeply embarrassing this is for Republicans? And the Freedom Caucus, by the way, their hands aren't clean in this either, given by the fact that President Trump is going after them. I thought Paul Ryan's head would roll, but it looks like he's going after the Freedom Caucus. I want to leave everyone with this because, again, I have been really angry about this all weekend. Ronald Reagan said 80%, as long as you agree with 80% of me, that's good enough for me. We have to get to a place where we are compromising and negotiating, and apparently the art of the deal isn't so good if you don't know how Washington and legislation
works. I agree with you completely, but you're talking about a group of legislators who are sticking with their ideals, and so many of these
nothing is ever good enough for the Freedom Caucus.
Let me finish my point, please. The problem here is the Republicans are masquerading as big government Democrats.
That's ridiculous.
And that is a problem. We're spending way too much money in way too many areas, and they're not tackling critical issues.
But does Mulvaney have a point, though,
like
about how rotten it is to the core in Washington, D.C.? And if you're a big businessman and you're trying to get, which our president is, right, and you're trying to get a deal through, time kills all deals. So I understand, actually, the rush to push this through when you know that you have so many people who might be acting on that rotten at the core. Does Mulvaney hit on something?
Yeah, I kind of find it amusing that he says Washington was more rotten than we thought it was. I thought everybody thought it was pretty darn rotten. Yeah. I think it could actually get more rotten. I think that Trump may find out that it's impossible to drain the swamp from the inside.
So how do you do it?
From the outside. I think that the only way to do it is voters voting people out. I think so. It's going to come to the point where I think a lot of, when it comes to like the senators, you know, senators are up every 3 years. 1/3 of the Senate is up every 3 years. I think that we're going to get to the point where voters get so fed up of how it doesn't matter what happens, it's always the same result, that they're going to start voting people out, and it's going to send a message to the other 2/3 that the next term.
But to Megan's point, people don't like this blame game that they're seeing in the aftermath of this.
It gets nothing done.
You first saw the president blaming Democrats, and then Monday morning we come around and he's blaming conservatives. People have a real issue with Eric Erickson, I think, is the conservative pundit who tweeted out, have we elected a president? I mean, it's time for some...
Everyone deserves blame, by the way. It's like moderates deserve blame, Paul Ryan deserves blame, President Trump does, the Freedom Caucus does as well. There is equal blame to be had all around.
What would you blame the president for, just out of curiosity?
I think the buck stops with President Trump. If it stopped with President Obama, there's no reason why it shouldn't stop with him. I disagreed with him saying this is the bill as it is or it's out, because there was concern from the Freedom Caucus and from moderates, both for different things. I do think we could have compromised and found a middle ground, or God, I hope so, because this is a cornerstone promise to the American people that has not only been completely blown, but the messaging is, which President Trump said on Friday, we're going to let this thing implode. Americans, you're going to suffer a lot more.
He said explode.
Explode, excuse me. You're going to suffer a lot more, and you're going to have to deal with it because Washington can't get anything done.
Kennedy, I want to ask you about this. So Paul Ryan said at that news conference on Friday, and I thought it was pretty poignant what he was saying. He said, we were a 10-year opposition party where being against things was easy to do. You just had to be against it. And now, in 3 months' time, we try to go to governing party where we actually get, 216 people to agree with each other on how we do things. And we just weren't there. No, it's hard to do big things.
And they don't have their legs underneath them yet as a unified party. And I know people think that that's bad news and it speaks to the rottenness in Washington. I think it's actually good that there is independent thought within at least one party, because the Democrats, and I want to focus on them for a little bit, because they act in lockstep like a bunch of mindless big government, big spending zombies, and they ultimately hurt the country and destroy our freedoms. Here they are celebrating the fact that this legislation failed. So they're celebrating the status quo, that Obamacare is staying. Obamacare is imploding. It is in the middle of a death spiral. That means more people are going to lose coverage. Insurance companies are going to pull out of whatever they can in a desperate last gasp. And that means that people are going to have to pay a lot more money for worse care, and it hurts everyone. There is nothing to celebrate here.
So it makes you wonder how key Democrats like Chuck Schumer are going to respond to this and take advantage of this now situation. He says he's he's up for finding common ground with the president, warning that Trump is destined to lose again, were his words. Quote, if he changes, he could have a different presidency, and he has a lot of suggestions of how he could help him change.
If that were true, I would totally applaud it, because I think we've gotten from the point of doing things that are good for the American public to doing things that are good for our party. So I would love to see Democrats and Republicans work together to get something that's good for the American public. The problem is I don't believe it. I think the only thing he's going to accept is basically the Democratic plan. Trump come over and basically do our bidding.
Yeah, but we have all the power and we still blew it. I'm sorry. We have Congress, the Senate, and the presidency. If we can't get things done when we have this much power, it's very little faith going forward we can get anything else done.
Well, I still point this out. The former president's name is still on Obamacare. I mean, it's the Affordable Care Act, a.k.a. Obamacare, but that's what everybody calls it. Until that changes, the Democrats do own a huge share of what happens to this. It'll be interesting to see if Chuck Schumer can maybe come up with some infrastructure project that he likes, that maybe he can, I don't know, wheeling and dealing to try to get them to come together maybe on some other areas. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes is expected to get more information from the NSA on whether any members of the Trump transition team were improperly unmasked during routine surveillance, as calls grow for an independent investigation, should there be one.
We're having too much fun for a Monday. All right, a big week ahead for the investigation into whether Russia interfered with the U.S. election. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes saying he expects more information from the NSA on any alleged unmasking of members of the Trump team. He postponed a public hearing set for tomorrow so he could call the FBI and NSA directors back for a closed session. The top Democrat on the committee slamming that move and repeating his calls for an independent investigation.
I think the chairman has to make a decision whether to act as a surrogate of the White House, as he did during the campaign and the transition, or to lead an independent and credible investigation. I hope he chooses the latter. The country really needs to have an independent, credible investigation in the House.
The Congressman Trey Gowdy defending Nunes for going to the president last week before briefing the committee on his findings.
My understanding is Chairman Nunes briefed the commander-in-chief on matters unrelated to the Russia investigation. So if that's a big deal in Washington, then we've sunk to a new low.
Meantime, the White House says President Trump's son-in-law and close advisor, Jared Kushner, will meet with the Senate Intel Committee as part of its Russia probe. So is an independent investigation, special prosecutor, what is needed here in your legal expertise?
I think an independent investigation, it would be great. The problem is, how do you get one? Because we're at the point now where everything is partisanship. How do you get somebody who isn't based, who isn't bringing in their agenda? I mean, look, a judge makes a decision we don't like. The first thing we do is say, who appointed him? Is he a Democrat or a Republican appointee? And if he happens to be a appointee from our party, then it's the guy's just an idiot, or the woman's an idiot. You know, nobody's willing to look at it as this is actually truly independent anymore. And then when you have this act of impropriety, I mean, even if it's not improper, it appears improper for Nunes to go running to the White House. This is no different than when Clinton met with Lynch in the tarmac. They can tell us it was about grandparents, just like Gowdy can tell us that it had nothing to do with Russia. But why does anybody have to believe them?
Wow,
and that's the problem. It's an appearance of impropriety that hangs a cloud over everything.
Well, and when you hear, because you've heard that comparison in previous days, but now as you learn even more about what he might have known, it makes that fit even more. Because, I mean, Loretta Lynch was in charge of that case in terms of whether or not it would be prosecuted against Hillary Clinton and the super secret server.
Sure.
And by all means, I mean, Nunes right now holds a lot of power in his hands. What about James Comey, the FBI director? You know, some calls about, well, should he even be in that position anymore? You talk about being politicized. Have we gotten that far with the FBI director that he's compromised?
I don't have to agree with Comey to think that he is a good person for the job. I think he is a good person for the job. I don't agree with some of the decisions he made. But frankly, you know, when he came out against indicting Hillary, which I think I didn't agree with. I thought there was enough evidence there. It wasn't really based on her intent, quote unquote, under the laws that existed. I still didn't question whether it was something politically motivated. And then turns around 4 months later and he does something the Democrats hate. You know, somebody like him, who is really not that concerned about whether he's angering one party or the other, is probably as close to independent as you're going to get. Or somebody like me who doesn't like the Republican or the Democratic Party. I like the Republicans and the Democrats. It's the parties I don't really care for.
So talk to me, Kennedy, about Jared Kushner and what we could learn there, because he has volunteered to go before the Senate Intel Committee. What could that testimony.
Yeah, and he had that meeting with Michael Flynn at Trump Tower with Sergei Kislyak, the Russian diplomat who's really at the center of this whole thing. And so you look at this, and I would love to see a comprehensive list of all the American officials, elected and otherwise, advisors, campaign advisors, strategists who met with this guy, because I have a feeling it's a pretty expansive list. You know, I have a feeling that that Russian diplomat is such a player, and this guy is just trying to seek out and exploit as much power as he possibly can, and he doesn't have a fetish for a particular stripe. He'll meet with anyone, because you know that he's met with Democrats. You know that he's met with Democrats on a number of different committees, and, you know, unless you are connecting all of the dots, you cannot just take the ones that are most convenient for your narrative and try and craft a story, because no matter what they do here, unless the dots actually make a picture of a dog or a clown, you have nothing there. And the allegations are so incredibly serious that they absolutely, the facts have to meet in order for there to be the kind of...
Megan, you've had strong feelings on this all along. Do you see the need for an independent investigation?
I do, but I agree with what Judge Ferrer said, that what does independent mean anymore? Yeah. No one trusts anyone in any facet of this. Mr. Nunez, when he came out saying that he was, you know, that he had possibly found information that was intercepted from another whatever, this really feels very conspiratorial to me in a lot of different ways. I just want clarity and transparency.
It seems like there's not a lot of it.
And again, this sort of, as you were saying, this sort of like intuiting what happened, trying to connect the dots. I think it's collectively exhausting for the entire population of the American people. And I would like hard facts, hard news. Please let me know how this is going. And if we have nothing new, we're just continuing to take little nuggets of truth to be used for whoever, you know, personal narrative, and it's an exhausting news subject to try and analyze, because depending on who's speaking about it, it's their political narrative they want pushed.
Well, we should learn a lot more this week. All right, after the health care fail, possible pivot to tackling tax reform, what that may look like.
Moving on from the health care failure, President Trump and Republicans are now looking to take on tax reform with what could be the first tax code overhaul in 3 decades. The chairman of the Ways and Means Committee is expected to convene a meeting on the issue tomorrow. White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus thinks Republicans and even some Democrats will be on board.
Moving forward, the president's vision on lowering taxes for every American is what's going to unite not just the Republican Party, but I think some of those Democrats are going to come on board as well if we can provide one of the biggest middle-class tax cuts in the history of this country.
Meantime, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says the White House needs to reject the Conservative Freedom Caucus and focus on working with Democrats to help the middle class.
If he aims a proposal aimed at the middle class and the poor people, doesn't give breaks to the rich, they're doing great. God bless them. I'm glad they're doing great. They don't need another tax break. We could work with them.
Okay, do you think that's fantasy that Chuck Schumer would actually end up working with Republicans?
Yes, I do. As we said in the last segment, I think that that the Democrats would very much like President Trump to accept their agenda and their proposals and go along with it. But as far as negotiating, I just don't see that happening in today's climate. I think that his proposal of President Trump should come work with us is more an opportunity to delay any success from President Trump for another 90 days so they can then say, look, it's been 150 days and he's done nothing. I just don't see that kind of camaraderie.
What do you think the likelihood is going forward with this tax reform, that Republicans will actually get to go forward? There's, you know, we're coming off of a big blow last week. So what do you think the likelihood is we can actually achieve this? As
we said in the last segment, I think that a lot of what President Trump, the ambitious plan that he was proposing, was based on success in the Obamacare front, and that obviously didn't happen. So I don't think they can walk away from that and just go right to tax reform. The other thing I think that President Trump would probably be wise to do is to sell his plans to the public. He got to where he is with public support, not with the party support. So I think that he needs to sell what he wants to do to the public and then let the elected officials go against the public will.
Well, one thing I would say is that the White House, a senior official, confirmed to Fox News earlier today that they were calling this the week of action, and that we can look forward to the president going forward with some new executive actions this week, executive orders out on trade, energy, environmental regulations. And, you know, the president has made it very strong that he feels that there is a way ahead in budget and tax reform. I'm still curious to know how you don't include health care and all of that, because it is a sixth, or is it a fifth? It's a big chunk of the economy. So
it is.
I mean, so I don't know how you go
tax cuts
forward.
would have been very helpful. It would have been very helpful for them, practically speaking, going forward with
it's an engine driver, right?
But you know, that's a tough part of healthcare to sell to the public. What you can sell in tax reform to the public is this is a proven way to get the economy going. You will have more of your money back. This is your money. You've worked for it. You deserve it. That is an easy sell. Everyone loves lower taxes. Now, the question is, do you go forward with some of those provisions that split the party, like revenue neutrality? You don't necessarily need that. Like the border adjustment tax. That could mean higher prices for a lot of goods we get in this.
But the fact that nobody can answer that question is what's causing so much uncertainty. And I will show you the Dow Jones Industrial Average right now. It's down 66 points today. We're looking at the longest losing streak for U.S. stocks in 5.5 years. There's uncertainty in the market in the face of this healthcare failure. There's concern that the current White House will not be able to get this tax reform done as it was sold to the public, as it was sold to voters and those who put Trump in office. There is a lot of concern right now, and it's fair to say that that sell-off you continue to see in the stock market is a result of what did not happen last week.
Yeah, that's the political uncertainty, absolutely.
Absolutely.
But if you have tax cuts, and you have to have tax cuts at the higher end as well, not just middle-class tax cuts like the president wants, but you also have to free up that economic engine and capital for some of the biggest earners. When you do that, the economy will grow.
The market loved that. That's what sent it to a record. And now
the bill would have done that anyway, because they were going to leave in those Cadillac high taxes in the bill through 2018. But I'm curious. So the president, the White House, calling this the week of action, going after things like energy and trade. That kind of gets at the heart of some of those issues that investors might be on the fence about. Well, can he get anything done?
That's just plain uncertainty. You're not seeing some chaotic sell-off in the stock market right now, but it is a very steady one.
We're still at 20,500.
Yeah, exactly.
With those items, does that help kind of quiet that down?
I think a lot of people are nervous in a lot of different ways. Again, I cannot overemphasize what a political blow this was. I said this on the show beforehand. If we screw up the Obamacare repeal and replacement, it is going to be very hard going into 2018 in a lot of different ways, because we have all power in the government right now and we can't get anything done. So going forward with tax reform, if we cannot get together as a party, Freedom Caucus, moderates, everything in between, and everybody, by the way, has a rightful voice. I know there are some people that think that one faction is more pure than the other. Everyone was elected for different reasons by different sets of constituents, and we have to work together as one for the good of the American people. Otherwise, I don't know what it means for the Republican going forward in the future, especially specifically for my generation, because I don't know how to tell people, you vote for our form of government, vote for what we believe in, but nothing will happen because we can't.
It's so interesting, though,
because it's about compromise. When I hear one side say, we were elected to get this done and we're not going to budge until we get this done, then you're done.
Well, it's such a telltale sign, too, because remember how many of those in the establishment were fence sitters when it came to the candidate then Donald Trump. And this kind of is a foil of that. It's like, oh, well, okay, now we know why that was. They really didn't agree. Now to the showdown over the Neil Gorsuch nomination for the Supreme Court. The Senate Judiciary Committee is meeting at this hour for the purpose of sending the Gorsuch nomination to the floor. But Democrats are forcing a week's delay.
It's nothing to do with Neil. It has everything to do with the Democratic base and the hard left taking over the Democratic Party. Here's what I would tell my Democratic friends. If you can't find the courage to vote, to give this man 60 votes, we cannot find a better person for you to vote on as a Republican. Then you're letting the Senate traditions go away. You're giving in to political demagoguery. You're letting the country down. And if I have to change the rules to put this man on the Supreme Court, I will.
But the leader of the Senate Democrats, Chuck Schumer, haven't said his name in, 15 seconds, is defending his party's right to filibuster.
60 votes make sense. You get bipartisan support. The bottom line is when we Democrats had a chance to change the rules, we didn't change it for Supreme Court for that very reason. And I'd say to my Republican friends and to the country, if you don't think if the candidate can't get 60 votes, if the nominee can't get 60 votes, you don't change the rules. You change the candidate.
He knows better than everyone.
Wow.
He does know better than everyone.
Sandra.
What? I was looking at Megan, actually.
Well, I mean, Neil Gorsuch could not be a more capable and prepared candidate. As we talked about on the couch last week, in 2006, he had bipartisan support with Democrats singing his praises all day long. And if they're going to blow this kind of political capital on a man like Neil Gorsuch, I can't even conceive of how bad it will get in the future going on to other further Supreme Court picks, especially when you're talking about the balance balance within the Supreme Court. And I just don't understand why they're blowing their political capital on this
part
specific
of it is
issue.
because some of them, you mentioned that third of the Senate that gets reelected every 3 years.
They're up.
I mean, part of it is that some of those people are up, and you've got people like Heidi Heitkamp, who is getting pressure, Claire McCaskill getting some pressure from the far left saying, no, you've got to do it this way. You've got to go against him, rail against him, even if you might think he's
but what about
valuable.
the other two-thirds? I mean, when I don't know how...
I don't know. I mean, it's like canvassing crickets.
I don't know how
you don't know which ones are singing and which ones aren't.
I don't know how Schumer can say that with a straight face. Yeah, 60 is the number today, but when Harry Reid decided to change the rules, 60 apparently wasn't the number then.
Right.
For federal judges, for cabinet appointees, the Senate has always been about compromise. It's been the more, I don't know, introspective of the two sides.
And it's a smaller group of people.
Sure, and they decided, in their infinite wisdom, to blow out the tradition and say, we're going to use the nuclear option. And everybody warned them. Everybody said, you know, you're not going to always be in power. When the Republicans get in power, they're going to use that same nuclear option against you, or the change in rules against you. No. Harry Reid, good job.
Lindsey Graham
Good
said
job.
the same
Now
thing
it's going to happen.
publicly. Lindsey Graham said we don't want to do this now because we know it's going to come back to hurt us later. The Democrats didn't have that kind of foresight because Harry Reid knew that he was going to retire comfortably in his chamber of secrets where he could have a love affair with his exercise equipment. You know, but now the Senate is left to deal with his kinky mess. And I'm sorry, but for the rest of us who happen to be independent and not members of either party, it's really frustrating. It's as though the Republicans called up Central Casting and said, give us a Supreme Court nominee who's likable, young, and can withstand the pressure, and who seems like the kind of person that Americans could traditionally get on board with. They delivered Neil Gorsuch. You know, and Democrats have to say one substantial thing about this guy's, you know, judicial philosophy that they have a major issue with, instead of Al Franken asking him what he would do with his tractor trailer in 14-degree weather.
But going back to Chuck Schumer, I think the exchange that Megan and I had while he was speaking is he delivers his message in a somewhat condescending tone.
Somewhat.
And as Harris, you mentioned leading into this, you do hear from the guy every 15 seconds. When we talk about political capital, he's not exactly been picky about political capital, if you haven't noticed, since Trump's been off.
Well, he's the face of the party, and there is some, you know, rumbling that he might even seek the highest office in the land. We don't know if that would ever happen, or if it,
Please do.
He hasn't weighed in on it that I've seen anyway.
Please run. I would love watching that.
But with Neil Gorsuch, you know, you talk about using your political power now and your powder now and all of your political weaponry for the Democrats, and how short-sighted that is in moving forward.
Yes.
Because if you invoke the nuclear option,
then
if you force Republicans to do that this time around, what will it look like when it really counts? I mean, you're going conservative for conservative on the court right now. What about when one of your people, the Democrats, are off the court, and there's a chance that a conservative could take his or her place? What do you do?
There's a very good chance that in the next 4 years, another justice is going to leave the bench, either voluntarily or involuntarily, and that's going to leave a vacancy to be filled. If you've created the situation where all you need is 51 votes, there's nothing to talk about. There's nothing to talk about. They're going to pick whoever they want, and that's not good for the American people.
Real quickly, Kennedy.
No, I think it does such a great disservice to the country, and I think this is one area where Republicans and Democrats traditionally, unless they had a massive issue with the nominee, they would go ahead and vote with the president's pick, because it is the one area where you understand the president who is in office has the right to nominate the Supreme Court justice.
And by the way, you don't expect them to agree with the pick of the Republican side, just like you know, the Republicans didn't necessarily agree with the picks that Obama made, but they didn't stonewall them.
Right. I always like this. I don't even know if it fits, but it's my favorite quote of Megan's. Sunlight always brings a little disinfectant, right?
The best disinfectant, yeah.
There we go. Anyway, again, I don't even know if it fits. Former Vice President Joe Biden says if he had to run for president last year, he could have won. Why he says he was the most qualified, and whether he would have been a better candidate than Hillary Clinton.
Oh, say it ain't so. Welcome back to Outnumbered. Former Vice President Joe Biden says he regrets not running for president last year and suggests that he could have beaten Donald Trump. Now, Biden, who ran twice before, as you remember, decided against a third try after his son Beau died in 2015. He told an audience at Colgate University that he had data, saying if he became the Democratic nominee, he had a good chance of winning. He also had this to say.
I was the best qualified, but the things that I've spent my whole life doing, American foreign policy, the ability to bring people together, the the respect on both sides of the aisle. I thought there was a need to bring the country together, and I thought I could have done it.
Megan, could he have done it?
You know, I love Joe Biden. I always will. I have a special place in my heart for him, even though we agree on almost nothing politically. The one thing I will say about this is I can't find a politician anywhere who doesn't have some revisionist history in their mind that if they had run for president in the last election cycle, things would have turned out differently. We forget too easily what a terrible campaigner this man was when he ran for president the 2 times that he did. Made a lot of really rookie errors, said a lot of just get on your Google, a lot of really dumb gaffes. I actually am not convinced he would have beaten President Trump, but I think America can collectively come together. He's a nice man, genuine man. I personally like him on a personal level. Don't know if
it would have been
president.
fun. That's for
It would have been a very different race, wouldn't it? Because, you know, Biden obviously comports himself differently than Hillary Clinton during debates. He knows how to fight when he has to, but he can turn on that likability and charm that she just doesn't possess and $1 billion can't buy.
But, I mean, he's saying right now he would have been a better candidate than Hillary Clinton, clearly then, right?
A tuna sandwich would have been a better candidate than Hillary Clinton. It's that pen right there, it's a very, very low bar.
Kennedy hit the nail on the head just in terms of all the polling and the resets that we saw with Hillary Clinton's campaign, you know, part deux out on some remote island off of New York where no one went to, and blah, blah, blah. He had likability. He has likability, and that was something that she couldn't seem to conjure up. I would say, and it happened live on this very program, Sandra, if you'll recall, we took his remarks saying that he wasn't going to run. And for the first, I don't know, 10 minutes, it sure did sound like he was going to run. I mean, I was like, okay, he's about to. Oh, no, he's not announcing. Oh, he sounds so disappointed and
it's like
sad.
James Comey. You thought he was about to indict Hillary Clinton, and then he pulls the rug out at the last minute. Very similar remarks, because you could tell there was a big part of him that really wanted to run.
I can understand. My mother lost both of my brothers. Both passed away. I
so
can't,
sorry.
and all of you have children. I can't imagine how you survive that. You know, how you lose a child, and so
Or
to then, in the midst of that, to turn around and run for president, which is,
But wouldn't that
as
be
we've
his
seen,
decision?
such a daunting task.
You know, I would almost believe that it was totally Joe Biden's decision if it were not for the downfall and the takedown of Bernie Sanders.
I think there's a lot of
what
pressure.
happened within the Democratic Party at that time with the desire, the thirst that was so real to anoint a woman to the throne.
You think he was
I
pressured
would
not to?
almost believe it was totally his decision, but I don't.
It would have been an interesting campaign when you have, I mean, you know, think of some of the things that Joe Biden has said. I mean,
you mean the gas?
Shoot somebody through the door with a shotgun.
But you would have had 2 candidates speaking
that's
from
what I'm
who
saying,
they are. I mean,
you would have
kind
had
of
Trump
from a
saying,
visceral place.
Okay,
you would have
but
Trump saying some of his outrageous comments.
From Biden's point of view, though, you're absolutely right. He would have gotten pressure within the establishment wing of the party saying
I
you
think
can't
he
run
did.
against her because you'll seem sexist. But also, Biden had to take a deep look at Bernie Sanders and his followers and say, this is not my Democratic Party. This is not the direction the country needs to go in. And that in and of itself is almost enough of a magnet. But, you know, here he's going to live with a lifetime of regret, don't you think?
Listen, I've met him in person. He's a lovely man with a sense of humor, which I think is really, really needed in politics today. I don't think he lives his life living in regret. I think he's been through a lot of personal tragedy, but he's a needed person in the Democratic Party in the sense that he's not flame-throwing in the way that Chuck Schumer is. He's friends with Republicans personally in his life as well. And that these lions of our political history who are, quite frankly, just going on the wayside, I think it's important that he still has a voice.
The way you speak of Joe Biden, I've never heard a Republican speak that way of Hillary Clinton. And President Trump's son-in-law and White House senior advisor Jared Kushner are being tapped to lead a new White House office aimed at fixing the federal government using business ideas. Can he shake up Washington with some fresh thinking? Maybe give D.C. a new attitude, as it were?
White House senior advisor Jared Kushner tapped to lead what's being described as a SWAT team focused on using business ideas to fix the federal government. The president's son-in-law will oversee the new White House Office of American Innovation, where he'll report directly to the president. The Washington Post reporting the office will be staffed by former business executives, will aim to infuse fresh thinking into Washington, float above the daily political grind, and create a lasting legacy for the president. It'll also reportedly help President Trump fulfill some of his campaign promises, like reforming veterans' health care and fighting opioid addiction. So I go back to you again, Kennedy, because we were discussing Jared Kushner and his involvement in this White House. What do you make of what we're learning here?
I think that he is a bright young man, and I think the president intends to tap into his resourcefulness at every step and every turn, which is fine. However, I think when you look at businesses and why they succeed, it's because there is innovation and ultimately a lack of government interference. And, you know, I know he's talking to people like Bill Gates and Elon Musk and some of these abstract, big picture thinkers, and government doesn't have that ability. It's antithetical to what government does. So the less government, the more innovation. So instead of creating a new department, a new post, why not just start getting rid of things that get in the way of business and that kind of great thinking that this
And you think he's a good guy for that job. So Megan, I mean, as far as we've seen, the relationship between the president and his son-in-law seems to be a strong one of trust and loyalty, and he seems to think that he's the right guy for this.
Yeah, and President Trump has also promised that he's going to bring peace to the Middle East. Remember, he said that about Jared Kushner, so very high stakes for Jared Kushner. I don't have a problem with any of this. I'm still confused exactly about what Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump's role are. Ivanka Trump recently got a security clearance, high-level security clearance. They're both working in the White House, but then they're on vacation in Aspen during the first giant legislative failure of their father and father-in-law's presidency. So I just would like more clarity exactly what this means. As you're saying, so you're going to be sort of creating new government agency? I don't understand what the role is exactly. So 100% just want more clarity.
So in an interview yesterday, Jared Kushner said the government should be run like a great American company. Our hope is that we can achieve successes and efficiencies for our customers who are the citizens.
My problem with this statement is, again, I'm not a business person, I'm a political analyst, but I do know that in businesses, there's not a lot of whipping up of votes on both sides, which was sorely needed during repeal and replace last week. So yes, it's fantastic we have people that are successful in business, but I don't think if we've learned one thing from last week, but it's important to have people that understand the nuances of how the government is run as well.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, Judge, the difference between the Obama White House and the Trump White House in terms of what Megan is saying, because the big criticism against President Obama were how many political hacks he had on his staff and in his administration. And now you look at kind of the flip and a new way of doing things.
He doesn't have enough political hacks.
I think we have to watch and see how this shakes out. I mean, we didn't really need a script on that former one because that wasn't a break from tradition by any means. It was just a whole lot more of what we'd already
Judge,
seen.
When you see some of the people that he's planning on working with here, Tim Cook, Bill Gates, as you mentioned, Kennedy, these are some of the people who have been some of the president's strongest critics when it comes to even the travel ban, for example.
Right.
Could this maybe be a way to bring some of those people together?
I think if Donald Trump accomplishes nothing else in his presidency other than changing the atmosphere in Washington from the bureaucratic mess that government always is to a more streamlined, efficient business type of atmosphere, it will have been well worth it. I just don't have a lot of faith that he'll be able to do that because the amount of government waste, I mean, if you were able to trim all of the government waste, you could pay for pretty much anything that he wants to pay for, including tax cuts. So his idea of trying to turn it into a more of a business streamlined atmosphere is great. The problem is the unions are going to fight you the whole way. The agencies are going to fight you the whole way. The lifers who don't ever get fired for incompetent performance because they're government officials are going to fight you the whole way. So
some might say you got to start somewhere. All right.
I agree.